They thought she was invisible, a woman with a mop, a name no one remembered, but the moment she answered the billionaire in perfect Arabic, the glass walls of power began to crack. Halberton Tower held its breath at midnight. The lobby's marble expanse reflected lattices of fluorescent light like a still lake, the kind that looks shallow until your foot vanishes into it. Vents whispered. Elevators blinked their tiny orange eyes. Cleaning carts moved like small ships crossing a polished sea, their hulls creaking softly, their cargo a domestic arsenal of bottles and folded rags and industrial lemon scent. Somewhere, an automatic air freshener exhaled. Somewhere, a printer dreamed and woke itself, spitting a single sheet and swallowing it again. The city roared outside, but in here, luxury lowered its voice. Nia Harper had learned the language of buildings. The squeak registers you left when a floor was still drying, the pitch of a stalled elevator, the way a boardroom door sighed when it didn't latch. Tonight she moved with a metronome certainty, the mop lifting and sliding, leaving behind a mirror that would be scuffed by 8 a.m. and repolished by 9. She had been graded in other lives, footnotes and Viva exams, the acid patience of a tutor's silence. But the floors gave their scores immediately. You knew when you'd done it right, you could see yourself in it. The executive floor smelled of wood polish and money. Nia eased her cart against the wall and let herself into a corner office, lights blooming at the motion of her entry. She wiped along the chrome edge of the desk where the oil from hands made half moons and gathered a constellation of paper clips into a small ceramic dish. On the bookshelf, leadership titles stacked like commandments, spines uncracked, a coffee ring stamped on a white paper about market penetration. She straightens. Edit without reading. She had learned not to read, or rather, to read without looking like she was doing it. Her phone buzzed once. Jordan, a ghost gray dot typing, then the bubble vanished. It often did. He was trying to sleep again probably, or drifting in the blue aquarium light of his laptop toward another tutorial, another hope. The debt notices came in an angry font. She had memorized their cadence the way she memorized poems. Nizar Kabani still surfaced sometimes, a line like a rope thrown over the side of a moving train. Sometimes she caught it, sometimes she didn't. She wheeled the cart back out, the wheels complaining over the seam in the hallway tile, and the sound from conference room B rose to meet her. Voices, layered, one puncturing, one eager, one trying to be a joke and failing. She paused mid-corridor, mop upright like a standard. The door was open by an inch. It was all an inch ever needed. Touches down Thursday. Security wants the underground entrance, a man said, clipped, already exhausted by the future. If we botch this meeting, kiss the merger goodbye. We won't botch it, a woman answered, the self-certainty of a permanent blowout in her tone. I've researched Saudi business protocols extensively. Chairs scraped. Someone sighed the way people sigh when money is near but not yet theirs. Nia's mop head rested on her shoe. The lemon smell climbed in her throat. She did not want to listen. She listened. Khalid El-Sahim has agreed to a 2-hour window. 2, the clipped man repeated. He can put this 200 million anywhere. We are not special. Translator? Another voice asked. Where are we with? Cancelled, the woman said. Emergency. Agency is scrambling. We'll have someone by morning. By morning is too late, the man snapped. He lowered his voice, but it still carried in the tile-bright hall. He's powerful, traditional, impossible to read. Don't offend him. Don't offend him. The words turned in the air and looked at Nia with knowing eyes, as if asking what she planned to do about them. She swallowed. The mop felt heavier. She pictured the old library on the high street, the narrow tables where sunlight came down like scripture. Not this building's light. This was utilitarian honesty, humming and unflattering. Oxford had been a different kind of fluorescent, gentle, filtered by centuries, the sort of glow that made even your mistakes look like research. A professor's sleeve brushing your essay, a scribble, elegant, incisive, the blue stamp on her fellowship letter, her mother's breath when she'd read it aloud, pride wrapped in fear. Then, later, the siren's red confetti over the night, the doctor's eyebrows knitting, Jordan's silence turning into a room with no doors. Nia learned to knock for him until her knuckles hurt. She learned to translate grief into grocery lists. She learned that not all languages had alphabets. In conference room B, the woman, Marina, Nia had seen the nameplate, kept talking. We'll rely on English. He was educated in the States. It will be fine. Fine, the man echoed, as if saying it twice made it true. A laugh, thin as a blade. I've downloaded 3 apps, someone said. They do simultaneous. Apps? The clipped man again. For a head of a family office? For someone who expects to be taken seriously? Another chair scuffed. Paper rustled. Nia leaned a fraction closer, the inch shrinking to a hair. She heard the word Harvard, as if that absolved everyone of trying. She heard flight times, the hush of a non-disclosure agreement, being slid across a table, the words optics and alignment and narrative. The building made its small midnight declarations around them. A distant thud, a mechanical throat clearing in the ductwork. In the silence between those noises, Nia heard a different sound entirely, the old cadence of formal Arabic spoken by men in pressed white thobes and by her professors in rooms that smelled of pencil shavings. Once, in a conference hall with bad coffee, she had watched a visiting minister wrap an entire room in his syntax. She had sat forward then, an acolyte to precision, knowing exactly how the sentence would land and marveling when it did. Now, the sentence waiting to land was a plane somewhere over the Atlantic. Khaled al-Sahim. The name glinted like a ring in shallow water. Nia found herself tracing letters on the damp handle of the mop, the shapes of his name curling beneath her fingers, language hiding in labor like a coin stitched inside a hem. The door opened fully. A gust of cologne and urgency hit her. She became part of the wall, chin down, eyes mild, the practiced erasure of a person who has learned what it costs to be seen. Executives spilled past, faces already somewhere else. No one noticed the woman with the mop positioned at their threshold as if measuring them for a frame. When they were gone, she rolled her cart onward. The hallway accepted her again without comment. She checked a restroom where a single paper towel had torn and hung like an unraveling thought. She smoothed it into the bin. She polished the mirror until it caught, briefly, a woman who could have been a scholar if time had folded differently. The mirror returned a janitor who knew how to vanish. Her phone buzzed. Jordan this time, for real. Couldn't sleep. Working on something. Love you. The words were small and huge. She typed back, brief, the way you write to not wake a trembling animal. Proud of you. Sleep if you can. In the stairwell, the building's bones exposed themselves, concrete ribs, the echo of her steps ringing down a spine. She stood there halfway between floors and listened to the quiet like it might tell her what to do. A mop and a degree had never looked farther apart than they did in her hands and head. Back on the executive level, she paused at the boardroom again. Her reflection hovered in the dark glass, as if she were already inside, as if a different version of her had gotten there early and saved her a seat. She remembered a professor's note, "Your ear is your instrument. Tune it to dignity." She had not understood then how dignity could be something you carried, a tuning fork you kept in your pocket in case the room went off key. "He's powerful, traditional, impossible to read. Don't offend him," the man had said. Nia dipped the mop, wrung it slowly, watched the water ribbon away, listened to the building breathe. She knew men like that, not their bank accounts or their commandments, but the way their speech braided metaphor and intent, the way respect was a currency that translated even when money did not. She knew, too, the American trick of smiling instead of understanding, of believing fluency was a function of prestige rather than humility. She began to mop again, each stroke an old reassurance. The lemon brightened. The floor shone so clean it seemed cruel to walk on. She thought of the apps on Marina's phone and felt, not anger, but the thin ache of being expected to watch a mispronounced world. There are collisions you can predict and still not avoid. There are moments, a door left ajar, a canceled translator, a line that lingers long, key perfume, that write themselves in invisible ink before they burst into view. As Nia rounded the last pane of glass outside conference room B, the tower's lights hummed their consent. The space was ready. The sentence was already on its way, carved and precise, searching for the mouth that would dare to answer. Halberton Tower didn't sleep. It only shifted moods. By mid-afternoon, its glass facade became a mirror for the city's greed, and by 4 p.m. that mirror began to hum. Lobbies gleamed like stages. Assistants rehearsed greetings. Security polished their badges. Everyone knew the foreign delegation was landing. Everyone was terrified of making the wrong impression. Nia Harper had been called in early to freshen up the lobby. It meant stay out of the way and make the floor shine enough to see the future in it. She pushed her cart through the main atrium, the lemon tang of her cleaner chasing after her, watching the world transform from its usual humdrum to choreography. A stretch limousine pulled up outside, black as obsidian, reflections of the tower curving along its body. The revolving doors breathed open, and a man stepped through. The air seemed to fold around him. Khaled al-Sahim. He didn't stride. He arrived, a presence that made people recalibrate their posture. Tall, impeccably cut charcoal suit, gold cufflinks glinting with a subtle arrogance. His face carried the serenity of someone who had long ago mastered both wealth and silence. Two aides flanked him like shadows, behind them cameras and murmuring press. The executives advanced, Walter Langford leading, Marina Westfield half a step behind, her smile bright enough to blind insecurity. "Mr. Al-Sahim," Walter began, extending both hands. "What an honor to finally—" "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Langford," Khalid replied in smooth, lightly accented English. He smiled, but his eyes were elsewhere. Catalog. Measuring, listening. They brushed across the room, over the suits and heels, over the receptionist trembling behind her podium, and then, briefly, over Nia. She felt it like static. Not admiration, not curiosity, recognition. The gaze of a man who had lived in rooms where people pretended not to understand him. As the delegation moved toward the elevators, a wave of expensive perfume followed. Nia bent to wring her mop, pretending not to look, but through the rippling reflection in the bucket she saw Khalid glance back once, the faintest furrow at his brow. Then the elevator doors closed with a sigh that sounded like the building exhaling. Upstairs, the meeting began. Nia was on the same floor, polishing the glass partition outside conference room A. Through it, she saw the tableau. Walter's eager grin, Marina's tablet glowing, Khalid seated like a king among courtiers. The translator's chair sat empty. She could only hear fragments through the tempered glass. "Unexpected delay out of Chicago," Walter was saying. "But of course, we can proceed in English." Khalid inclined his head. "Of course, though some meanings prefer their native soil." He switched languages mid-sentence. Arabic, rich, elegant, the consonants low and deliberate. The aides nodded. Walter blinked. Marina tapped furiously at her phone until an app began to speak, robotic and absurd. The camel structure of profit is agreeable. Laughter. Nervous. Misplaced. Khaled's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Nia froze, cloth suspended halfway up the glass. She knew that tone. It was the linguistic equivalent of closing a door politely. He had tested them, and they had failed. Through the reflection, she watched Marina lean forward, still smiling too wide. "We, understand perfectly," she chirped. "No, you don't," Nia thought. "You don't understand anything." Khalid murmured to his aide again, quietly this time, and Nia's stomach turned because she caught it clearly. They prepared everything but understanding. They see the money, not the mind. The app translated, "Go, odd preparation, money and mind together." He sighed. The sound traveled through the glass like a tremor. Something inside Nia cracked, not rebellion exactly, but inevitability. The mop handle was still damp against her palms. The language she had buried for years rose, unbidden, like breath after drowning. Her reflection looked back at her. Navy jumpsuit, name tag, eyes bright with fear. She turned the handle, pushed the door open just wide enough for sound to travel, and spoke before courage could reconsider. "You said," she began softly, in formal Arabic, "that partnership cannot stand on sand, that it requires respect, not just profit." Silence detonated. Heads turned. Marina's smile froze. The aides stopped typing. Khalid's expression changed in the smallest, deepest way. A spark of amusement, then warmth, as if he had been waiting for this exact note in an unfamiliar song. He answered her in Arabic. "And you, madam, where did you learn to hear what others miss?" Nia's throat tightened. "Oxford," she said, switching languages smoothly. "Before life changed its syllabus." Walter looked between them, uncomprehending. What's happening?" Khalid smiled without looking at him. "Understanding, Mr. Langford, something your translation app could not provide." Nia realized her hand was shaking. The mop had slipped sideways, dripping water onto the marble, tiny constellations of fear and wonder. But Khalid's gaze held her steady. "Would you remain," he said gently, in English now, "and assist us with interpretation? It seems you are the only voice in the room fluent in more than language." Every executive stared at her, mouths half open. Marina recovered first, her laugh brittle. "Oh, how charming! Our staff is so diverse these days." But Khalid was already rising, extending a hand toward Nia as though introducing an equal. "Miss Harper," she said. "Miss Harper," he repeated, the syllables carrying weight. "Please join us." Nia set the mop aside. The wooden handle clattered once, sharp and final, like a gavel closing judgment. She stepped into the room of glass and money, feeling every stare prick her skin. No one moved, not even the air. And in that suspended moment, the hierarchy of Halberton Tower inverted, an empire built on translation failures bowing, however briefly, to the woman who understood. The conference room pulsed with the silence of disbelief. Nia could hear her own heart, steady and insistent, like a drum beneath glass. Every executive stared at her as though the laws of the building had just been rewritten, because in a way, they had. The janitor had spoken, and the billionaire was listening. Khalid al-Sahim's gaze didn't waver. It wasn't the empty politeness of men used to being served. It was the still, analytic attention of someone who had seen masks torn away before. His dark eyes studied Nia as if she were an unexpected riddle that might just reveal the whole truth of the world. "Continue," he said softly, in Arabic, as though testing both her fluency and her courage. Nia's throat tightened. The language rose naturally, beautifully, as if it had been waiting behind her ribs all along. "Your words spoke of partnership built on understanding," she said, "and understanding cannot exist if only one side is allowed to speak." The air crackled. Even those who didn't understand Arabic could feel it, the rhythm, the authority, the dangerous calm. Khaled smiled faintly, his expression unreadable, but no longer cold. He switched back to English for the rest of the room. "Miss Harper is correct. Partnership begins with respect." He gestured to the empty chair beside him. "Please, sit." Nia's knees felt weak. Somewhere deep inside her, a younger version of herself, Oxford Nia, scholar Nia, was blinking awake after years in the dark. She moved toward the table. Marina Westfield's perfume hit her first, sharp, artificial vanilla. The woman's frozen smile cracked just enough to reveal the anger beneath. "Well," Marina murmured, leaning back in her chair, "this is unexpected." Walter Langford, the CEO, managed a strangled laugh. "Ah, yes, quite the surprise, but perhaps useful under the circumstances." His eyes flicked to Nia, weighing her as one might an expensive but inconvenient object. Nia sat down slowly. Her palms were damp. The executives resumed their performance, papers rustling, screens glowing, but now, every few seconds, the rhythm of Arabic threaded through the conversation. Khaled spoke in his native tongue, not to flaunt superiority but to measure truth, and Nia translated flawlessly. No app stuttering, no mispronounced idioms. She didn't just convert words. She carried tone, history, cultural breadth. When Khalid spoke of trust, she made them feel the word's gravity. When he used a proverb about sand and stone, she found its soul in English. Slowly, the tension in the room shifted. Where there had been discomfort, there was now awe. Even Walter leaned forward, genuinely listening for once. 2 hours passed. The deal that had teetered on the edge of disaster was now back on track, even strengthened. When Khalid finally stood, everyone else followed like tides obeying gravity. "This was productive," he said, his eyes on Nia, "largely thanks to Miss Harper." A murmur of agreement fluttered around the table, though Marina's smile was more like a cut. Khalid turned to Walter. "If it pleases you, I would like Miss Harper to accompany my delegation tomorrow, as interpreter." Walter hesitated, calculation flashing behind his pleasant mask. "Of course, Mr. Al-Sahim. Whatever ensures your comfort." When the meeting broke, the executives poured out in tight clusters of whispers. The janitor who'd silenced the room was now the building's loudest secret. Nia stayed behind, helping gather scattered folders. She could feel Marina's eyes on her. "How clever," Marina said finally, reciting a few memorized lines to impress the guest. Nia looked up, calm. "Those weren't memorized." Marina's jaw tightened. "You should be careful. People don't like being upstaged by the help." Nia smiled faintly. "Then perhaps they shouldn't underestimate it." Marina's eyes flashed with something close to hatred. "You won't last long. The system doesn't change just because you spoke once." "We'll see," Nia said and turned to leave. Outside the boardroom, Khaled waited alone by the window, the city glittering behind him. "You handled yourself well," he said as she approached, "and you reminded them what true communication sounds like." Nia bowed her head slightly. "Thank you, sir. I only did what was necessary." He studied her again, this time less as an enigma and more as an equal. "I remember you," he said suddenly. She blinked. "You... peace. Remember me?" "Oxford," he said. "A symposium on cross-cultural negotiation. You presented a paper. Language as a bridge, not a weapon." I never forgot that line. The memory hit her like sunlight through fog. She had been 26, nervous, radiant with purpose. Her paper had drawn applause that felt like a promise. That same week, her brother's accident shattered everything. She hadn't known Khalid had been in the audience. "I didn't expect," he said quietly, "to find you again with a mop instead of a microphone." Nia met his eyes. Life doesn't always translate the way we expect. He smiled, a genuine soft smile that reached his eyes. Perhaps it's time to correct the translation. He reached into his jacket and handed her a cream-colored envelope. The paper was heavy, embossed with his foundation seal. "A token of gratitude," he said, "for today." Nia took it, hesitant. "You don't have to." "I insist," he said. "And tomorrow, my car will collect you at 9. If anyone at this company objects, tell them it's a direct request from me." Then he was gone, surrounded by his aides, leaving Nia standing in the soft hum of the conference floor, the envelope trembling in her hand. Down in the lobby, the night janitors had gathered in quiet curiosity. "Girl, what did you do?" Anna whispered as Nia joined them. "They're saying the Saudi guy fired half the translators because you out-talked them." Nia laughed under her breath. "Nothing like that." She looked down at the envelope, inside a single handwritten note in perfect Arabic. "Your voice carries more weight than titles. Use it wisely." And below, an invitation. "Dinner, private discussion, 9 a.m. Nia folded the note slowly, her mind whirling. Above her, Halberton Tower gleamed with its 1,000 glass eyes, watching her every step. Somewhere within, people were already rewriting her story, some with admiration, some with fear. But Nia Harper, the invisible janitor, now carried a secret none of them could touch. The most powerful man in the building had recognized her not as a servant, but as an equal. And she sensed, deep in her bones, that this was only the beginning of a storm. Morning light cut through the Manhattan skyline like a blade of gold, slicing across the glass skin of Halberton Tower. The building gleamed as if nothing extraordinary had happened the day before, but beneath its polished calm, whispers rippled through every department. By 9 a.m., everyone, from the executives in $1,000 suits to the interns clutching tablets, had heard the same rumor. The Saudi tycoon spoke Arabic, and the janitor answered. Nia Harper arrived through the back entrance as she always did, her work badge clipped to her pocket. But this morning, something was different. Security guards glanced at her, not with the blank indifference she was used to, but with uneasy curiosity. Conversations hushed when she passed. At the front desk, Anna from night shift met her with wide eyes. "You're trending," she whispered. "Someone posted a clip, just a few seconds of you translating for that man. It's everywhere on internal chat. Even HR's panicking." Nia froze. She hadn't realized someone had filmed it. "Take it down," she murmured. "Too late," Anna said. "You're the tower's ghost story now." Before Nia could respond, the elevator doors slid open, and there he was. Khaled Al-Sahim, the man whose single nod could raise or ruin companies. Standing beside him was a younger man in a tailored navy suit, his chief aide, men. "Nia," Khaled said, his tone formal but warm. "You're early. I wasn't sure if you'd still want my help." "I always value people who bring clarity where others bring noise," he replied. His eyes swept briefly over the staff who had stopped pretending to work. "Shall we?" As the elevator doors closed behind them, Nia caught her reflection in the mirrored panel, the janitor and the billionaire standing side by side. The irony wasn't lost on her. They rose in silence until Khaled spoke, low enough that only she could hear. "You remind me of my sister," he said. "Brilliant, stubborn, underestimated. In Riyadh, she teaches women who were told their voices didn't matter. You and she would understand each other." Nia's throat tightened. "I've spent years trying not to speak," she admitted. "Then perhaps it's time you start." The elevator stopped at the top floor, the private suite, a space reserved for billion-dollar meetings and untouchable egos. Yet today, Nia was the one opening the door for Khaled and not the other way around. Inside, the table gleamed like black water. The skyline burned orange beyond the windows. Walter Langford, Marina Westfield, and the other executives were already seated. Their expressions ranged from forced smiles to thinly veiled hostility. "Miss Harper," Walter said coolly, "how surprising to see you joining us again." Khaled's tone cut through the room like tempered steel. "At my request, she will serve as interpreter for the remainder of my stay." Marina's jaw flexed. "Of course, Mr. Al-Sahim, we're delighted." The meeting began, but this time the tension wasn't between languages. It was between truth and theater. Khaled's questions were sharp, deceptively simple. What do you value more, growth or integrity? How do you define partnership? Walter answered in numbers, Marina in slogans. Only Nia's translations carried the weight of meaning. When Khaled turned to her mid-discussion and said something quietly in Arabic, "How can you build towers on sand?" She paused before translating. Her English version came out as, "He asks how a company can stand when its foundation ignores the people who built it." Every executive froze. Walter's smile cracked like cheap porcelain. "That's not what he said, is it?" Khalid's voice was calm. That is exactly what I said. The silence that followed was the kind that only truth could create. When the meeting ended, Khalid rose first. Miss Harper, he said, walk with me. They stepped into the corridor where sunlight spilled across marble floors. He handed her a folder. These are proposals from my foundation. I would like your opinion, your honest one. My opinion? She echoed. I do not hire translators who merely repeat words, he said. I hire people who understand them. She nodded, heart racing. I'll read them tonight. Good, he said, because tomorrow you will present them to me, not as a janitor, as an advisor. And then he left her standing in the hallway, stunned, exhilarated, terrified. Downstairs, the air was colder, the fluorescent lights buzzed harsher. Nia walked toward the janitor's storage room, her sanctuary of mops and silence. But today, she wasn't alone. Marina was waiting, leaning against the wall, her emerald suit catching the light like armor. Well, she said, voice sweet as glass. The cleaning lady turned diplomat. How impressive. Nia's shoulders tensed. What do you want, Marina? To help you, Marina said, stepping closer. Because right now you're in over your head. You made the CEO look like an idiot in front of a foreign investor. That's not courage. It's career suicide. I don't have a career here, Nia replied evenly. I clean floors. Marina's smile widened, sharp as a blade. Not for long. HR is already reviewing your file. Unauthorized presence in the executive conference room. Breach of confidentiality. You'll be gone before that man leaves New York. Nia met her gaze. If you're so confident, why are you warning me? Marina's face flickered, anger beneath poise. Because I don't like being outshined by someone who doesn't belong. Nia's voice dropped to a whisper. Maybe the problem isn't where I belong. Maybe it's that you've built your place on people you think don't matter. Marina's eyes went cold. Enjoy the spotlight while it lasts. She turned, heels clicking like a countdown. When she was gone, Nia leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Her phone buzzed. A message from her brother Jordan. Saw the video. Didn't know you could still speak Arabic. You looked like Mom when she used to argue with Dad. Calm but unstoppable. I'm proud of you. Nia smiled through the blur in her eyes. Then she noticed something else in her inbox. An anonymous email. No subject line, no name. Only one sentence. You're being watched. Don't trust anyone in that building. Her stomach dropped. Outside, the wind howled between skyscrapers. Inside, Halberton Tower hummed with deceit disguised as business. Somewhere above her, Khalid al-Sahim was signing documents worth millions. Somewhere nearby, Marina was whispering to HR. And somewhere hidden in the circuits of the building's surveillance system, someone else was watching Nia Harper, waiting for her next move. She looked down at the folder in her hands. Khalid's foundation plans, clean, ambitious, visionary. And in the reflection of the glass wall beside her, she didn't see a janitor anymore. She saw a woman standing at the edge of something vast and dangerous, something that could either set her free or destroy everything she had left. The tower wasn't just glass and steel, it was a mirror. And for the first time, Nia was done cleaning it. She was ready to break it. Night fell like ink over Manhattan, and Halberton Tower became a different creature entirely, its mirrored walls no longer reflecting the city, but swallowing it. From a distance, it looked serene. Up close, it pulsed with secrets. Nia Harper sat in her small Brooklyn apartment, the folder Khalid had given her spread across the table. The pages smelled faintly of cedar and expensive paper. His foundation's proposal was ambitious. A cross-cultural education initiative bridging business and ethics, East and West, language and dignity. But hidden within the fine print, Nia noticed something odd. Clauses buried under philanthropic jargon, referencing affiliate contributions from shell companies she recognized from Halberton's internal invoices. Her fingers went cold. Someone inside the company was laundering money through Khalid's planned donation. A message blinked on her phone. Anonymous. They know you took the file. Get out of your apartment. She froze. The hum of her fridge sounded suddenly too loud. A shadow moved out. Side the window. Maybe a tree, maybe not. She grabbed her jacket, the folder, and slipped into the stairwell. Her footsteps echoed all the way down the narrow concrete throat of the building. By the time she reached the street, the night air hit like cold glass. Her instincts told her to disappear, to hide, but another instinct, older, stubborn, moral, pushed her toward the truth. If what she'd found was real, Khalid's reputation could be weaponized, and the company could ruin both him and her in one blow. She ducked into a late-night diner, the kind that smelled of old coffee and fried hope. She slid into a booth near the back, pulled out her phone, and started scanning the documents again. Her heart thudded when she saw a name repeated on several pages. Marina Westfield, the VP herself. She wasn't just manipulating HR, she was funneling Khaled's money through offshore fronts, hiding millions in consulting fees. A soft ding startled her. Another text. Unknown number. You shouldn't have read it. Her breath caught. She looked around the diner, only 3 people inside. A tired waitress, a man in a hoodie scrolling his phone, and an older woman stirring tea. Still, every reflection in the window looked like a pair of watching eyes. She locked the folder inside her bag and slipped out the back door into the alley. The city's pulse roared, distant sirens, dripping pipes, the hiss of steam from a grate. Her bus stop was 2 blocks away, but as she rounded the corner, headlights flared too close. A black SUV idled at the curb, its tinted window slid down halfway, just enough for a familiar voice to emerge. Miss Harper. It was Armin, Khaled's aide. Nia hesitated. How did you find me? The same way they did, he said. You triggered a storm, and now everyone's trying to control where the lightning lands. You mean Marina? He shook his head. Not just her. Halberton's board. Walter too. They're planning to frame you, claim you stole confidential data to blackmail Mr. Al-Sahim. There's a meeting at midnight to finalize it. Nia's mind raced. And Khaled? Armin's expression darkened. He doesn't know. They've kept him isolated all day. But I can get you into the building before they destroy the evidence. She looked at the SUV, at the reflection of the city trembling in its windows. Why help me? Because, he said quietly, I saw what you did in that room. For once, he believed someone spoke truth without agenda. Don't let them take that from him. Against every instinct screaming otherwise, she climbed in. The ride back to Halberton Tower was silent except for the city's heartbeat outside. Horns, neon, distant thunder. When the SUV stopped in the underground garage, Armin handed her a security badge. Level 42, HR suite. There's a private server room at the back. If you copy the financial logs, you can prove where the money's going. And if I get caught? His eyes flicked toward the elevators. Then it won't matter what language you speak. The elevator ride felt endless, the hum of the cables mixed with the thump of her pulse. When the doors opened, the corridor stretched before her, glass, steel, and shadows. The HR suite glowed faintly at the end, empty but humming. She slipped inside. Rows of monitors flickered. Screensavers floated corporate slogans across the dark. She moved quickly, inserting the flash drive Armin had given her into the terminal. Folders unfolded on the screen like blooming lies, offshore accounts, dummy vendors, false contracts, all routing through Marina's division. Suddenly, the lights above her flickered, then footsteps. She turned, and there stood Marina Westfield, her emerald suit gleaming under the cold fluorescence. Well, Marina said, voice a low purr. I didn't expect the cleaning staff to be so resourceful. Nia's pulse spiked. You're stealing from your own company, from him. Marina tilted her head. Don't moralize, sweetheart. Men like Khaled are sharks. They expect a few remoras to feed off their deals. It's just business. It's theft. Marina stepped closer, heels echoing like gunshots on tile. You think anyone will believe a janitor? You're a ghost. A pretty little nobody who had her 5 minutes in the sun. By tomorrow, your badge will be deactivated and your name scrubbed from payroll. Nia held her ground. You're wrong. Marina smiled, slow and venomous. Am I? She pressed a button on her tablet. Security's on the way. Maybe I'll say you threatened me, tried to access confidential data. A desperate employee, disgruntled. Tragic, really. Nia's eyes darted to the flash drive. The download still in progress. 93%, 94, 95. Marina took another step. You don't get to rewrite your story, Miss Harper. People like us don't exist in the same story, Nia finished, her voice steady. The download hit 100. The terminal beeped. Nia yanked the drive just as the door burst open. 2 guards rushing in, flashlights cutting through the air. Stop right there! Nia sprinted toward the opposite exit, Marina shouting behind her. The guards followed. She ducked through a side corridor, weaving past cubicles and glass partitions. Alarms began to wail, red light bathing the floor in pulses. Her lungs burned, her shoes slipped on the polished marble she'd cleaned 100 times. At the elevator, she slammed the button, heart hammering. Nothing. Locked down. She turned toward the emergency stairwell and pushed through, the echo of her steps tumbling down 40 flights. When she burst out into the underground garage, Armin was waiting, engine running. Got it? He shouted. She held up the flash drive. Got it. As the SUV roared into the night, the tower's alarms faded behind them, replaced by sirens swelling through the streets. Nia looked back once, through the rear window, at the glittering tower that had tried to bury her. Where are we going? She asked. Armin handed her a phone. To him. But you should know. By morning the story will break. They'll paint you as the traitor. You'll lose everything. Nia stared at the flash drive, at the proof glowing faintly in her hand. Then I'll build something new from the ashes, she said quietly. This time, on solid ground. Outside, thunder cracked over the city. Lightning flashed against the glass of Halberton Tower, briefly illuminating the silhouette of Marina, watching from her office, a glass of wine in hand, fury glittering in her eyes. The storm had begun, and this time the janitor wasn't cleaning up anyone's mess. She was about to expose it. The city never truly slept. It just shifted forms. By dawn, Manhattan's towers wore the pale shimmer of deception, pretending peace after a night of storms. But for Nia Harper, sleep had become a luxury of the innocent, and she was no longer innocent. She stood at the edge of Khaled Al-Sahim's hotel suite balcony, the skyline unfurling before her like a kingdom she'd once cleaned from below. The flash drive sat on the table beside untouched coffee, its polished surface reflecting the rising sun. Evidence, proof, power, the kind she'd never wanted, but could no longer run from. Inside, Khaled's voice rumbled through the room like restrained thunder. You have done what my own people could not, he said, walking toward her in his immaculate dark suit. You uncovered the disease inside this company, but now, Miss Harper, you must decide. Do we heal it quietly or expose it to the world and watch it burn? Nia turned from the glass, her reflection fractured across the skyline. You already know my answer. His gaze was steady, unreadable. Yes, but I wanted to hear it from your lips. She exhaled slowly. Truth doesn't heal in silence. It festers. A shadow flickered across Khaled's expression. Approval, perhaps even pride, but also something else, wariness. Then we must prepare for war. By midday, Halberton Tower was on fire, not literally, but in the digital sense. An anonymous leak had flooded financial journalists' inboxes with the data from Nia's flash drive. Offshore accounts, shell firms, names, Marina Westfield's signature on contracts now under federal scrutiny. The board panicked. The CEO, Walter Langford, denied knowledge. Statements were drafted. PR teams spun narratives. Yet the story spread faster than control. And when the name Khaled Al-Sahim surfaced, every major outlet wanted one answer. Who leaked it? Within hours, Nia's photo, pulled from a company security feed, was everywhere. Janitor turned whistleblower at center of Halberton's scandal. Her phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Some messages praised her, others threatened her, but one text froze her blood. You cost me everything. Watch your back. M. Marina. That night, Nia sat with Khaled in a dim conference room at a secure location, one of his private offices overlooking the Hudson. The air smelled faintly of rain and danger. They will come for you, he said, clasping his hands. Marina will not go quietly. And Walter, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Walter is cornered. A cornered man will do anything. Nia leaned forward. Then let's corner him harder. Khaled's brows lifted, intrigued. You sound like me now. Maybe I'm finally learning your language, she replied. He smiled, not with amusement, but respect. Then you must also learn this. Power is never taken cleanly. It always stains the hands that hold it. Before Nia could respond, the office lights flickered. Then, darkness. A hum of tension filled the air. Khaled reached for his phone. Nothing. Dead. Backup generators, Nia whispered. Should have triggered. From somewhere down the hall came the metallic echo of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, closing in. Khaled's tone hardened. Move. They slipped through a side door into a narrow maintenance corridor. Ironic, Nia thought, that her escape once again began among mops and brooms. Security alarms buzzed faintly in the distance, but no guards appeared. Whoever had cut the power knew the system intimately. They reached a stairwell. Nia gripped the rail, heart pounding. Khaled motioned for silence. A beam of light sliced through the dark. A flashlight sweeping the hall they'd just left. Voices followed. She's here. The janitor. Get her and the files. Marina's voice. Nia's pulse roared in her ears. She's working with Walter. Or above him, Khaled murmured. Some puppets cut their own strings. They descended the stairs in silence until they reached the basement garage. Rain drummed against the ramp leading to the street. A sleek black sedan waited near the exit. Khaled's driver, Armin, signaling urgently. But before they could move, another car screeched in, blocking the path. Marina stepped out, rain glinting off her crimson coat, her hair plastered to her face, her eyes wild with rage. "You think you can humiliate me, you sanctimonious fraud?" she spat. "You destroyed my career." "You destroyed yourself," Nia said, her voice steady despite the storm. Marina laughed bitterly. "No, you did. You and your sainted billionaire savior." She reached into her coat and drew a gun. Khaled stepped in front of Nia instantly, motioning her back. "Marina," he said evenly, "put it down. This will not end the way you think." "Shut up," she shouted, trembling. "You used me. All of you. I was smarter than every man in that building, and still, they saw me as decoration. And you," she sneered at Nia, "you're their new symbol, the Cinderella with a mop, the miracle story. Do you think they'll ever truly let you in?" Nia's voice cut through the rain. "I don't need their permission anymore." Marina's eyes burned, her finger tightened on the trigger. A gunshot cracked the night, but it wasn't Marina's. She jerked, then collapsed, the gun clattering from her grasp. Behind her stood Armin, his weapon raised, expression cold. "She aimed at the wrong person," he said simply. Nia stood frozen, her breath shallow. Marina's body lay motionless under the rain, her red coat spreading across the pavement like spilled ink. Khaled placed a steadying hand on Nia's shoulder. "You saved my foundation," he said quietly, "but it came at a price. You've now seen what power costs." Nia turned her face toward the storm, eyes brimming but unbroken. "Then I'll make sure the cost means something." 2 months later, Halberton Tower gleamed under new leadership. Walter Langford had resigned amid federal investigations. The board had been dismantled, its corruption exposed. And the company's biggest investor, Khaled Al-Sahim, had announced a sweeping reform initiative. At its heart was the Harper Fellowship, a global program for overlooked talent, inspired by one woman who refused to stay silent. Nia stood at the podium of the new press conference, cameras flashing, journalists leaning forward. She spoke with quiet fire. "I was invisible once, but invisibility is only a trick of light. All it takes is one reflection, one truth, to shatter it." Applause thundered through the hall. In the front row, Khaled watched her with something that looked almost like pride, and perhaps unspoken respect between two people who had both once lived behind masks. When the cameras stopped flashing, Nia stepped down from the stage and met him near the exit. "So," she said softly, "was it worth the chaos?" He smiled faintly. "The chaos was necessary. You were necessary. But be careful. People will want to make you a symbol. Don't let them. Symbols inspire. Leaders endure. And what about you?" He extended his hand. "Let's endure together." For a moment, the world outside the glass walls seemed to pause. The city lights, the storm beyond, the reflection of two figures who had rewritten the narrative of power itself. She took his hand, not as a subordinate, not as a savior's protege, but as an equal. From the janitor's closet to the global stage, the woman who once cleaned the floors of power now stood beside it, unbowed, unbroken, and unforgettable. And in the silence between thunder and applause, the world finally heard her voice, clear, commanding, and impossible to ignore.